when we talk about the in-between, the nexus of our lives, of our reality. So often when we look back at our lives, we look at the milestone moments, these plateaus and footprints that we leave behind as markers of our life's journey. That only makes up about 20 to 30%. The rest is defined and connected by the in-between. Everything that takes place in between. And this is where the art of the spiritual warrior comes in. We can develop the tools and the means to identify all these different elements in our world and become the alchemists of our lives, peering through the nexus and the prism of our multiverse and drawing forth all that we are into the present now.
You come to me today on the day of my daughter's wedding and you ask me for a favor. I'm going to make you an offer that you can't refuse. I'm going to make you a contender.
Welcome to the Wolf's Den, everybody. I don't know, I just wanted to do a little performance for you there. Hello, I'm feeling good today. Got a good vibe, got a good energy. Ready to share that with everybody, ready to share that with the world. And I've been having a lot of good discussions lately with people, colleagues, tribe members, looking at all the in-between that's taking place. We're currently in a really, really big time of transition. And I invite anybody who's tuning into the show to please chime in with your comments. What's happening in your world transition-wise that you are looking at the mechanics of the in-between now, starting to move past these old formats, these old conduits that we were producing our energy flow into, and looking at the mechanics of it now. With that, I mean, let's tell some stories. Let's talk about my mechanics. Let's talk about what brought me to my understanding of the in-between. And oh my goodness, do we got some stories to talk about there. I guess it really started back for me. When I was a kid, I was one of those very high energy, charismatic children. I was always able to take the lead. I was always able to kind of stand out from everything, and I wasn't shy by any means, shape, or form. Was I not shy? And I remember being in junior kindergarten back in Ontario, and it was their version of like preschool or whatever. And my teacher back then, shout out, by the way, to anyone who may be viewing this from Bradford, Ontario, junior kindergarten class, way back in the day. David, I remember you had the green Power Ranger shirt, rock on, brother, and the Ninja Turtle shoes. I still remember that. So it was back in this class. I really started to lean into that a lot, just being that performer, being that center stage kind of guy. I could draw that attention. And my teacher ended up loving me so much that my mom always said if I ever went missing, she was the first suspect. And I believe it was that admiration and, of course, my natural skill level that gave me the role in the lead role in the Christmas play that year. We were doing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And I remember I was so excited. I memorized every song. I memorized every cue. I wore those antlers in the nose around the house. Even when we went to visit my grandparents, I would wear them. And my grandpa used to tease me all the time. Who are you? Ajax, the red-nosed reindeer? No, Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer. And he would just throw out all these wrong names just to frustrate me. And I remember going up on stage. It was the night of the play, and we were all getting ready in the classroom. And we're all, getting our noses just right and our antlers set. And I'm so excited. They pull us out of the class and they bring us backstage, and there was different pieces to the play. They had concert portions and music and all that stuff, and the principal's doing his introduction for the junior kindergarten class to come do Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. The mistake they made was asking me to stay still. I was Rudolph. That was my show. You don't tell. That's my show. Who's out there holding my microphone? I don't know where that mentality came from, but when that nose was on, that was my show. And I stormed out on stage in the middle of the principal saying his speech. And I held my hand out and I said, I'm Rudolph, and that's my microphone. And the crowd busts out laughing as this, little 4-year-old kid, so determined and confident in his presence. That's my microphone. What are you doing with that? And he argued with me for, I don't know, about 2 or 3 minutes before he finally gave in to all the laughter and all the audience, peer watching him at that point. And as soon as I got the microphone, instead of starting the show, I turned to my mom in the audience. I point her out, and I blew her the biggest kiss in the world, and she's ducking down in her chair, trying to, oh my god, that's my son. She was proud, but of course embarrassed. And that's how I really started to know personally. I can trace that back to being some of my first memories of knowing I had a spark in me, knowing I had something unique about me that I wanted to share with the world. I didn't just want to keep this talent hidden or not realize it. I wanted to share it with everyone. You couldn't stop me from performing when I was growing up. It didn't matter what the scenario was. But that gets challenged, when we get into points like adolescence and our peers are now looking at the judgments within themselves and projecting them onto others because they don't know how to process what's going on within themselves. That was a big struggle for me, and it actually made me lose a lot of that sense of self. It made me forget a lot of that sense of self. I don't want to use the term lose, because to lose something, I have to choose to release it and let go of it. But I didn't. I just forgot. I didn't know how to step into that space of me anymore. And a lot of that came from bullying. A lot of that came from judgment. And I got into some really dark spaces by the time I was about 14 years old. And, due to my wanting to be that vibrant, expressive, creative version of myself, while at the same time wanting to fit in and happening to fall in love with the most popular girl in our grade at the time, all of these elements kind of culminated into an alchemic formula that I was not prepared for. I didn't know the arithmetic behind that. And I didn't know how to handle that energy at the time. So I took it all very, very personally. And it pushed me to a point of almost wanting to end things by the time I was 14, thinking there was nothing else beyond just this pain that I was going through, and wanting to find a place to overcome that, wanting to find a way to overcome that. Cindy says she played Scrooge in our 6th grade play. No one else wanted to be Scrooge. You know what? Someone's got to be Scrooge. And I'm sure you did it masterfully, Cindy. Thank you for sharing that. So as I get to this point when I'm 14, I had to make a quick decision, very quick, to either succumb or overcome. And that's exactly what I did. I actually said to myself, I'm not going to let these people take this away from me. I'm not going to let these people win. And at the time, yes, it was, ego-driven and shadow-driven and all of that, but it was still a conscious decision. It was still a conscious decision. So I started at that point, unconsciously, learning about taking back my power. Years of adolescence after that, going through high school, going through young adulthood, I went through a lot of different defense mechanisms, is a good way to put it. Drinking, drugs. I got into, it's an interesting field because it wasn't necessarily gang activity, but it could have certainly been misconstrued as such. I by no means was a part of a gang, but I had this image in my mind that if I surround myself with this type of fearful ambiance, it'll either earn respect or fear. But either way, I won't be bullied anymore. I'll be protected. So I kind of forced myself into this environment that I never really was naturally inclined to be a part of. I felt like it was a safe place. I felt like I could build a serene confine of defense in that space. Little did I know that being in that space was almost more abusive than what I was trying to shield myself from. So I had to go through those years of experience, and eventually took me to the bottom of the barrel with, drinking and drugs and stuff. By the time I was about 18, I was at this house party and I couldn't recognize any of these people around me, the people that I had known for years, but I was so completely out of it, I could barely recognize them. I couldn't recognize myself, like my state of being. I couldn't recognize my own thoughts. I couldn't recognize my conscious awareness and presence. And this was all only by the time I was 18. I had pushed myself to these limits. And I remember sitting there at that house party at about 5:30 in the morning. And I said to myself, I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah, I can't even control my own thoughts. What's going to happen when my actions are out of control? And it had been to a certain degree to that point, but it hadn't gone to an extreme yet. But I was aware that it was getting to that point. It was getting close. So I pulled myself out and I stopped drinking. I stopped doing drugs, like quit everything cold frickin' turkey. And the only way that I did that was I literally became a hermit. By the time I was about 18, 19, I forced myself into a routine of go to work, go home, go to work, go home, go to work, go home. I stopped partying. I stopped doing it. Now, did this mean I was completely clean? No. I learned to drink casually where I wasn't going out and getting completely hammered anymore. And that happened April 2010. I remember the date specifically because it was a girl that I had a crush on and it was her birthday. And I made an idiot out of myself because I got too drunk. And I said, I'm not doing that ever again. I'm not getting that drunk ever again. So I learned how to casually enjoy alcoholic beverages without getting shit-faced, basically. Pardon my language if I can't swear, without getting completely hammered. And the saving grace that I found was through some natural remedies like marijuana, for example, and certain things like I would play around with psychotropic mushrooms. And it helped clear my perception of those addictions that I had. And it really let me see what was valuable for me, what was adding to things in my life as a medicine, and what I was just conditioned into having as a part of my world. And these were like domino effect lessons. These were happening quick simultaneously, all at the same time of trying to grow up. Like I'm 20 years old at this point, just starting onto these lessons, and I'm trying to get a stable foundation in my career. I'm trying to find stable places to live, roommates, all that stuff. Figuring out what I want to do with my future, trying to worry about if I want to do extra schooling, all this other things. And it was an incredible period to start that inner growth. And it all domino effect, and it happened so quickly. And it led me to early 20s. I believe I was about 21, I want to say. Yeah, around 21. That's about right. My sister tells me she starts studying in Reiki at one of the local colleges in Calgary, Alberta. And she's telling me about Reiki, telling me about this energy practice, this whole, we're tapping into universal energy and we're using it for healing. And in my mind, I start going to, these old versions of myself, knowing I have this power, knowing I have this thing, but I have no direction and I have wounded ego. So I'm thinking as she's talking about this stuff, I'm going to harness it and I'm going to make some Dragon Ball Z Kamehameha energy waves with it. And she just stops and she looks at me. She goes, that's not how Reiki works, Alex. That's not how Reiki works. I go, that's how I'm going to make it work. Okay. So I was so adamant that I was going to manipulate these energies in this way. So what I started to do, I'm jumping ahead. She then led me to the piece of information that I had never known up to that point, up to 21 years of life. And she says, we have a psychic history on mom's side of the family. I go, what are you talking about? She goes, yeah, mom used to hear voices when she was a kid, and her grandma was a psychic. And I go, really? And I remember when she told me that, these shivers went through my entire being, not just in my spine, but like my whole being just went like I went into a meat freezer. And it was this undeniable knowing of that's what I felt my entire life. That's what I felt, this connection to something so much beyond myself. But all I had was wounded ego experiences and, kind of ego conditioning from mainstream media and all that other stuff. And it led me to this kind of martyr hero mentality with everything. which we're going to explain how I had to overcome that aspect of things. But this was the key. This was the first key in the door, and it unlocked my awareness towards that energy flow in me. So what I started to do to practice my Dragon Ball Z Kamehameha mastery was I was playing with the energy. I started to, do that thing where you rub your hands and you start playing with the energy in between your hands. I can feel it like it was two magnets pushing against each other. I would hit this certain point and they would push back. And then I realized I could play with that energy. I could make different shapes out of it once it actually formulated and I concentrated it between my hands. So that's what I did, is I kept playing. And I remember the first time I felt the magnetics and I was in shock. I could not believe that I felt an actual magnetic force just between my two palms with a little bit of concentration and focus. So I played with that energy. I would make blocks. I would make circles. I remember I tried to make an energetic sword out of it at one point in time. And it was an incredible, imaginative, creative experience. And it led me to asking my sister to teach me Reiki because I wanted to know more about the energy flow. I wanted to know more about specifics on how to direct it. And part of that too was I was hitting the personal point in my journey. Like I had just been talking about this hero martyr mentality where I knew I hit a block and I needed teachings. I needed something to assist me in that next elevation. And that was a teacher. That was going to be a guide. I had a belief system up to that point that I was harboring a lot of darkness in me. I started to receive messages from guides once my sister Ashley started teaching me Reiki, and I went through my first few levels. And the spirit guides that were showing up were telling me exactly what I needed to hear. But my current level of consciousness and perception on what I was hearing was all based out of that hero martyr mentality. Ooh, we got a beautiful comment from Tanya saying the background. Has anyone else noticed this gorgeous background? We have Norma Jean to thank for that. Norma Steen to thank for that today. Norma Stein. She was wonderful and she put this together for us. So thank you so much, Norma. So yes, going back to it, my spirit guide messages were being filtered through this perception that I had, and my perception was that I was a martyr. I was just playing the martyr at that point. And they were guiding me towards understanding my power, telling me things like I was a gatekeeper, telling me things I'm supposed to be a leader, I'm supposed to do these. And again, that martyr mentality made it so tunnel visioned. It made it so much adherent to what my wounded ego wanted to hear that it wasn't conducive, or I wasn't equipped is probably a better way to put it, to hear it in any other way just yet. And I remember having visions of going up and meeting ascended masters, sitting around in this golden, what we could only describe as what we would imagine Mount Olympus to be. All the infrastructure is made out of this shining, pure, pristine gold. There's this misty energy that's kind of looking like clouds around. And I remember looking around and seeing Egyptian gods, Atlantis gods, Sumerian gods, all of these, what we have known in our historical records as ascended masters, looking at me when I'm in this space going, oh, we've been waiting for you. And my martyr mentality comes down going, oh my God, I'm like an ascended master, forgetting the fact we all have the potential to get there. It's the ascension process, knowing that it's part of a collective. It's not, my individual journey is meant to add to the collective. So I had to learn how to break through that martyr mentality. And what ended up happening was a series of events. And again, this was after I had taken my first few courses in Reiki. So I started to understand universal energy flow, how to heal blocks in myself, how to communicate with my own energy flow a lot better, all of these very, very important elements. And the series of events that took place after that were intense. Massively intense, because they were meant to shatter that paradigm that I had. Like I had mentioned, when I was told that I was supposed to be a gatekeeper, I had this image in my mind at the time that what I was keeping behind that gate within me was a demon. I was holding back all of this darkness, and I was the only one that could honor and keep this gate. And I have so much darkness inside me. Oh, this is why all these bad things happen to me, because I'm a gatekeeper and it's calling all of this dark energy towards it. All of these things I was using to further justify this martyr mentality, because I wasn't healing the shadow. I wasn't taking accountability for things in my world. So that's what these next few experiences or series of events started to show me, was how to take power, how to take accountability, how to use a lot of these tools that I've been developing through Reiki, through metaphysical awareness and higher consciousness development. So my spirit guides started to show up in a number of different ways. I had spirit guides show up from past lives that were there to guide me through certain experiences. I had one of my samurai generals from an old feudal era Japan lifetime that I'd spent, and he had shown up as a spirit guide to walk me through some very, very stressful and very trying times where I needed a lot of warrior energy to get through and stability to get through. So he was there for a couple years, actually, very, very close to me, side by side, as I went through those journeys. I had an old Reiki master from Asia. He was of Chinese descendant at the time, but it was very different provincial back then from his lifetime. So I can't speak specifically to location. I just know he was from Asia, and he was one of the first spiritual teachers and spirit guides that I had come in that gave me attitude. And I didn't know how to take that at first, because I was all, spirit guides are supposed to be these benevolent creatures. And he was incredibly benevolent, but he just wasn't about putting up with my crap, is all that it really was. Is he knew from our past lifetimes together that I had this potential, I had this capacity, I could do these things from a soul level. And he just wasn't about to let me, in this encounter, in this lifetime, give him any excuses. So that was a first kind of a wake-up call at that point. The experiences that led from there started to take me interdimensionally. And that's where I understood that terminology of gatekeeper really came in. I had asked for, like I had said, teachers and guides. And as I was calling in my guide, Mr. Dr. David Piltz, who is the Star Nation pipe carrier, a very prominent figure as far as the exchange of Star Nation knowledge is concerned, was preparing to show up in my world. I was calling for him, not knowing that we had already spent past lifetimes together either. So as I was calling for him, my whole nerve center had to be prepared to learn how to take that information, to learn how to be the student that was ready to receive that teacher. So I started to have interdimensional spirit guides show up, extraterrestrial, if we want to call them that. The very first one that I encountered was a version of a gray alien, but he wasn't gray, he was brown skin. And when he first came up, he told me his name was Ilyix, and it hit me on this level of, you're me. And he goes, yes and no, because what I've come to know about civilizations such as the gray aliens, it's one of the parallel dimension timelines of human descendant, basically. So he had a lot of genetic markers that linked us, which is why we were able to connect the way that we were. And he showed up in a few different facets to broaden my perspective a little bit, understand what star seed souls are on Earth to do in the first place, which is to gather cosmic experience. It's literally to experience what life in this plane of existence is like. And But that got really brought to my attention when I was going through this, and I was watching the show Third Rock from the Sun, and it's the exact concept. They're aliens that take human form to experience what life is like as a human, and it was just so on point, right? The alignment of the universe was feeding me everything I needed to know through all the facets of um, outlets and resources that were available to me. So I always laugh at that show broadened my perspective to that. But Iliacs also brought me to challenges, tests, if I want to call them that. I remember I went through a meditation one day, and it was one of the first days that I had astrally traveled my consciousness. Um, he flies overhead as I'm in meditation, and I shoot up. My consciousness goes up, and I land in his ship, and we start going to a bigger ship. And I said, "Where are we going?" He goes, "You've been here before." I said, "Oh, okay." And he goes, "This is supposed to happen." And I go, "Okay." So it was very vague, but at the same time, he was expecting me to just understand what was going on. So we get to this bigger ship. And as I get inside, it's this massive, vast, circular, round space. There's decks and there's railings and there's kind of things like that, but there's nothing separated. There's no like rivets, there's no separate rods that create these platforms or anything like that. Everything was It's like it was a bio entity that extended itself to create the format that was necessary of the users, which is what I've come to know as interdimensional technology to be formatted as is it's biotechnology. So I'm looking around at all of this, and I'm looking at all this expansive space and all these aliens walking around and doing their thing on the ship. And I look out at the front window, the bridge, whatever we want to call it, the viewing window, and there are these two robed beings there that kind of look like aliens. They look like their own version of grays, and they're like I said, they're robed and they're standing there, and they look at me and they go, "Do you remember?" And I go, "Not necessarily, but I'm okay with things." Like I couldn't point back to what they were talking about. I had been there before, but I was okay with being there. I knew there wasn't anything that I couldn't handle by being there. It was in that moment when they say, this was such an interesting moment. They looked at me and they went, "When the time comes, we want you to remember what we did for you." And it was in this like manipulative, blackmaily type of format, like cadence that they said it. And when they said it, their energy all around them, their aura became so clear. It was this dark, goopy, not dense, but heavy, like just this heavy weighted aura. And I immediately looked at him and said, "You're out of your mind. Like you're playing the wrong game here." And what I personally do when I'm in the spirit realm, I tap in, and in the astral realm as well. I tap into my inner child. I tap into these facets of my imagination that light up my soul in such a way that I shoot power out of every possible crevice in my body. And to do that in that instance, I morphed into a Power Ranger. Is basically what I did. I took that inner energy and I utilized it, and I took a defensive um, posture, and that's how it materialized in that essence. And it was enough that when that energy shone off, when I morphed, um, the whole thing dissipated, like the entire energetic uh, fallacy or veil that was there, it dissipated, and I was kind of standing there in the cosmic. It wasn't the void, it was the cosmic, I want to call it. And Ilyix was there, and we're both just kind of floating, and he goes, "You did well." And then I go back into my body, and I realized, oh my God, that was all a test. And the big ship with those two guys flew overhead after. Their aura completely changed. It was this whitish blue hue, and they just looked down at me and they nodded, and they went about their business. And I go, wow, what an encounter. Like, what an encounter. So that was one of my first experiences with calibrating this energy without being a martyr, without playing this I'm a superior being and I'm taking so much weight on me because I'm the only person that can do it. And instead I just read the present experience and responded. I didn't just react, but I responded in the way that was called for from what I was being presented with. So from there, I had some other experiences where, as I'm growing up in this space, my masculinity is kind of all out of whack from a lot of the physical encounters and third dimensional material stuff that I was going through. My masculinity was really out of whack, and I was a growing adolescent trying to reach adulthood. You know, I still considered myself in adolescence at my early 20s because I hadn't anchored into being an adult yet. So I was waiting on these types of experiences. Hello, Sharon. Pleasure to have you here. Good evening. Good evening. Um, I had a banshee, sorry, not a banshee, a succubus show up. Now, the teachings that I've been given on succubus, when we think about the stories that we hear, there are these ghoulish, horrible creatures that feed off the energy of men and turn them into these lifeless husks and blah, blah, blah. I say blah, blah, blah because I've come to know very, very differently. That's what I thought when I first saw this thing. I felt this weird energy behind me. And I had had a few encounters with past life wives, for example, that would always show up behind me, put their hands on my shoulders and, you know, massage or caress or something like that, showing affection from behind. So when I felt the energy come behind, I go, oh, is that you, past life wife? And sure enough, I see this ghoulish thing kind of floating there. And I go, what the hell are you? And I reacted. I didn't respond. I reacted. And I caught it in an energy field. And I said, if you're going to be this negative creature, I'm going to show you what the light is like. And I took this superiority complex into play. And I don't really know where it came from, to be honest with you, in hindsight, but it was there. And in the force field that I caught it in, I transmuted and I purified the negative to the light, to the positive. And that's what I was really learning with my alchemic abilities at the time, was harnessing the darkness to enhance the light, because a candle never shines brighter than when it's engulfed by shadows. So knowing that, the more shadows that surround us, it's more opportunity for the light to shine that much brighter. So I was playing around with a lot of these modalities, and that was my first energetic extension into utilizing it. And I purified this being, or I mean, I use the term purified. I transmuted this being into light energy from dark energy. And it's wandering around the house now in this daze. Like, it has no idea where to go, what to do, what any of this stuff means anymore. And I'm thinking, look at me, I did so proud. It's trying to relearn life from a light perspective now. And I remember telling my mentor, David Pills, about this, a while after it happened, and he and I had began on our journey together. But he looks at me as I'm expressing it to him, because I'm thinking I'm going to get an attaboy. And he goes, what makes you think you had to do that? And like my whole ego just went, oh God. So he explained to me at that point the real teachings behind succubus or succubi. Now, they do feed off masculine energy, yes. They don't feed off of a healthy, flowing masculine presence that is grounded, that is unified within himself, that is a sovereign conduit for his own masculine energy, because there's no way to tap into that. He has it on lock. A masculine energy that is fully contained is and sustained. There's no way to access it externally. What succubi do is, when that flow isn't contained within the self, when it's overflowing and there's all of these extensions, there's all of these ways to tap into the energy, that's when succubi come in. That's when they feed off of that energy on a man. And that's exactly what was happening to me at the time. I was in such a static state of my masculine development, and I had no direction with it. I had no um, uh, conduit of self. There was no way to sustain it within myself. It was flowing. It was just pouring out of me in all types of directions, and it was there just literally, A, to feed, but B, to also actually, in essence, assist the masculine. Because when it feeds off of that energy, and all of that excess and all of that static is then removed from the presence, it's basically like hitting a reset button. And then we get to channel the flow in a very different way once it starts back up again. So he had explained all of these teachings to me, and I realized what I had done in that instance, where I didn't respond. I reacted. I stepped up as that superiority complex, the martyr, all of that. So I took that as another lesson towards what spiritual warriorship actually meant, what it meant to be so present in one's power. And then it led me to some of my other experiences where, and I'm just going to go out there and get weird, because it's, whew, this is the place for it. And some of you are going to resonate with some of these stories. I started to learn about, the inner workings of some of the human systems, and some of the old teachings on things like the Anunnaki, things like the reptilian races, and how even in modern day, you don't have to be doing metaphysics, you don't have to be doing spirituality. There are terminologies that utilize draconian as a moniker with it. We have draconian law, draconian banking, draconian politics. Why? Where did that term come from if there wasn't some link to these stories that we hear about with this stuff? So I started to dive in and learn about the interstellar a lot more, because I was already having these interactions with Ilyax, with some of these other encounters. And it led me back to when I was a kid, and I even had my very, very, very first experience with an interdimensional creature, which turned out to be Ilyax. I didn't know until later, but I was, God, I couldn't have been more than like 7 or 8 at the time, probably. Max 9, 8 or 9, let's call it. And I had sleep apnea. I would stop breathing because I would snore so much, and I believe that's the sleep apnea stuff. But for me, it was a weird. It wasn't your traditional version of it. When they went in and they got me tested with it, they were saying, yeah, there's stuff you can do, but I mean, it was the 90s at the time, so they didn't have a lot of the technology that's available to combat that type of stuff now, or to assist in supporting through that stuff now. So they gave my mom a holistic method of making sure I just didn't die by stopping breathing in the middle of the night. And basically what they told her was just gently nudge me awake every few so hours when she's anticipating that I was going to, start snoring that heavy that I would cut my breathing off. Not enough to wake me up, not like a jolt, just like a nudge, just a roll over to have me wake up my eyes, reset my system. And it worked. It worked for years and years and years. I would just wake up, roll over, open my eyes, roll over, and fall right back asleep. And it was just a reset system. So one night when I'm 8 or 9 years old, she's doing this. She's coming into my room to come check on me before she goes to her room. And I'm wide awake. My eyes are wide open. I'm huddled against the wall in like a fetal position and on top of my bed. And I'm pointing at the corner near my closet, repeating boogeyman, boogeyman, boogeyman. And that's all I was saying over and over. And mom didn't know what to think. So she was, slightly concerned, but also thinking I was just having a nightmare. So she calmed me down and put me back to bed. I fell asleep. She went to bed. Everything hunky-dory. Wake up the next morning, come downstairs. I'm all chipper. Mom, can I get a grilled cheese? Sure, I'll make you a grilled cheese. How are you feeling? What do you mean, how am I feeling? I feel fine. Oh, well, you had a bit of a nightmare last night. You're okay afterwards? I go, what do you mean? I had zero memory. I had no memory of anything that she had explained to me that took place. The only reason I can explain it now is because she told me about it. I had no memory of that stuff. As I get older, start doing this stuff. I'm going through this metaphysical journey, blah, blah, blah. And I start learning about how to do things like tap into your past lives, tap into repressed memory, things like that. This memory comes back up, and I get a clear vision of that night. And I remember in the corner of my room, as I rolled over and I woke up, I see, and I come to know it as Ilyix now, but I see this hunched over, big head, big eyes, brown skin alien just looking at me. And he kind of stood up, and he goes to raise his hand. He didn't raise his full arm. He just kind of extended up at the elbow. And that was enough to set me off. Now, when you're a kid in the middle of the night and you see something like that, how do you quantify it? Boogeyman. So when I had that memory regression, things just started to click. And I said, I have a tie to this intergalactic federation that we keep hearing about. I know there's something there. So again, I'm studying things like the reptilians and Anunnaki and all these ancient civilizations that we come to hear about. But there is this draw again to what's up with draconians. And I've always had a thing with dragons. When I talk about morphing into a ranger, into a Power Ranger, I morph into the green dragon Power Ranger, because it's also representative of my soul aura colors as well. That's how they extend out, is in that same contrast and format. So I've had a tie to dragons my whole life, and it's part of the alchemic side of me. Grey Wolf, as who I am in this current lifetime, is what grants me the perception of walking in that in between. My alchemic and my wizardry and my magical abilities, that comes from my tie with the dragons. So I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to learn more about this mystic aspect of things. And I had already done things like, at this point in my journey, I had done a shaman walk to the spirit realm, and I met my power animal. My power animal was Panda, which is just in perfect line with being Grey Wolf, having that cohesion of the light and dark in one essence. And when I would do my journeys to the spirit realm, and I would have the encounters with the spirits like that, Dragon and I knew there was something more there. So I wanted to look into it more. And I started asking my guides to provide more information on this. And again, learning about the reptilians was one thing, but I very quickly learned they're not draconians. Reptilians are not draconians. They have pieces of draconian DNA in them, but reptilians are a hybrid race. Reptilians are an ancient hybrid race that was here before what we come to know humans as. Neanderthals may have been, wandering around, but humans as we know them were not on the planet when reptilians had their existence here first, kind of origins and stuff like that. What I came to realize was the draconians were a very empirical race, very, very empirical, very about conquer and honor and their version of strength, their version of power, right? And in some essences, based by human standards and ethics, it could be seen as savage, quote unquote. But I promise you that there is no undignified draconian that I've walked into based on their standards. They walk in a very, very honorable manner according to them. And I had my first encounter with this when I was asking to be taken to receive more teachings. And Ilyix takes me up on the ship one day in meditation, and he goes, "You need to be quiet." And I go, "What?" He said, "You need to be quiet." Okay. We get to this place, and I had never astral traveled to an infrastructure like this before. The pillars or the columns of this massive room, like I'm talking thousands of feet massive. I felt like an ant walking into this place with Ilyix. And way at the bottom, at the end of the hall, there's these pillars, these podiums, and there's 5 representatives. And I've come to recognize those 5 representatives as this sector of the Galactic Council, because I had also had an encounter with them earlier where they placed implants in my hands, which is another story we'll get into later. But in this particular instance, I recognize them as the Galactic Council, and in front of them, in front of the podium, is one of the most gargantuan creatures I've ever seen in my life. And it's this white scaled with this, I want to call it a magenta rainbow. It's the only way to put it. It's colors that humans don't really have a concept of, but it had this magenta, crimsony rainbow holographic reflection that was going over the scales when light would hit it. And the eyes were not this blood red. The only way I can put it is a royal red. They were they didn't feel malevolent. They didn't feel like an evil demonic red. It was very regal. It was just powerful, passionate, just, oh, wow, take this seriously. And he's screaming at the council, pointing back at me, going, how can you let this mutt into these chambers, talking about me like I'm just the most disgusting thing that he's ever seen. The white draconian race is one of the most pure-blooded beings in this sector of the galaxy. This is where a lot of the hierarchy that we've come to know through royal bloodlines of keeping things in the bloodline, blah, blah, blah. That's where a lot of that mentality and modality actually was originated from. It's from the pure blood race of entities like these draconians. And that's the white scales. These are the white scales. They are the purest of the pure. They're the overlords. And he's looking at me because humans are a mix of all these different 12 different Star Nation DNA strands. And he's looking at me like I'm impure. I shouldn't be in this place. I shouldn't be allowed here, blah, blah, blah. And Ilyix again is walking next to me, and he's just looking at me and expecting me not to say anything because he told me to be quiet. I don't know what the hell it was. The council said something to him, and he starts turning around and storming off, walking towards us, this massive draconian. I don't know what in bloody hell I was thinking, but he's walking past me, and I turned to him, and Ilyix looks at me, and he just stops, and his mouth kind of went. And I looked at this dragon, and I didn't say anything. I just smiled at him. I gave him a smirk. And even me as a person, I don't normally do that. But at the same time, I don't know, there was just this energetic flow that said, he's not going to walk all over you. You've got his DNA mixed in with so many other strands. Like, his ignorance isn't going to push me over. And that's a lot of my energetic presence when I'm in that state. So he walks past me after I do that. And we get up to the podiums, and the council looks at me and goes, oh yeah, by the way, you're going with him. Talking about the draconian that I just gave attitude to. And I said, what? So yeah, you're going with him. He's going to teach you about spiritual warriorship. I didn't know what to say. I was completely dumbfounded. I thought, this was, just a really in-depth hallucination. And, what are you talking about? I'm going with the draconian, blah, blah, blah. I said, nope, you're going with him. So the meditation and the vision kind of ends there. I come back to my body, and I'm telling my sister about this because I'm thinking I'm physically getting taken away, and I'm going to be going on this journey, and I'm going to be going on this trip to go learn about spiritual warriorship. It was an astral journey. I would spend hours at a time in human time frame, which translated to days, weeks, and months in some instances, in that astral realm of training with this draconian overlord, where he was teaching me about indomitable spirit, what it meant to conquer oneself, what it meant to become so powerfully present that you don't have to exert force in a show of dominance. You simply become immovable. You become impassible. It was incredible lessons. And some of the stuff that I ended up going through, like their rites of initiation and things like that, were just, again, what we would consider to be savage or barbaric, but I understood the process and I accepted it. I don't want to get, because some of it's kind of graphic, I don't want to get into detail on it on here, but it led me to the point of understanding more and more and more about the alchemy of what all these different roles of beings, of entities, of energy at play in our world, and how it affects us, how it all culminates, right? Because we are that culmination of it all. 12 different star nations contributed to create a ladder, a DNA ladder of DNA to accentuate each one enough to alchemically formulate a 13th strand as a whole. Each one of those 12 make up one strand, and now all of them combined make up a whole new 13th as the human being. And that's what we are within the star knowledge culture. So I came through all of these realizations, and coming back into reality after having experiences like this was, I mean, challenging is barely even putting a cap on it. Learning to interact with the regular, average, everyday person and the operating systems at play. Once you start to garner that type of experience and perception on things, you absolutely feel like you're going crazy. Oh, was that one of the biggest challenges, was understanding that if I'm going crazy, I have to just kind of let that happen now because it feels so right. It just feels so right. So I did. I had to get to that point of accepting I'd be okay with hugging myself in a strapped on jacket, eating pudding for the rest of my life. I like pudding. That's fine. Eventually, it led me to such balance, because that surrender of trying to formulate everything, all of these different experiences as they came through, I kept trying to identify with each one. And there are so many more stories we'll get into throughout upcoming shows on more in depth on this topic in particular. But every time I would garner a new epiphany in my world, a new piece of information, a new extension of perception, I would lock in and identify with that and make it the whole. And oh man, did that take a long time to learn how to balance properly. And it led me to exactly where I am now, of that space of the in-between, of realizing that if I'm putting all of that energy trying to figure out those details on all of that stuff, like all of these changing details. Tango, love your story, so interesting. Oh, thank you so much. Please keep tuned in. There are so many more. Like, I barely scratched the surface on this. When I keep putting all of that focus into identifying with each one of these individual new levels of expansion in my world, I'm not alchemizing everything. I'm not bringing it all together. So I'm not actually balanced. I'm imbalanced because I keep pushing forward in one direction instead of having an acceptance of my current presence. Ooh, isn't that interesting? How often are we always pushing forward to reach that next stage rather than reaching that acceptance of where we are now, knowing that that acceptance is the key? I kept trying to control things around me, not realizing that to surrender that was to actually gain control. There's a quote, I think, from the Doctor Strange movie where they say, you can't beat a river into submission, but you can surrender to its current and utilize its power as your own. And that's exactly what we do with universe. When we show up to the universe distraught, emotionally, struggling in some way, shape, or form, demanding change because we deserve it, we're nothing more than crying children stomping our feet in a toy store having a tantrum. Universe feels our presence on how we show up. The words that we say, the spells that we cast through that are meant as a reflection of that energetic state that we're already sourcing from within us, how we're showing up. So when you show up like that to universe, it gives you more based off of that frequency. But when we show up present, whole, saying, this is who I am, And these are the things that I require to stay in my alignment. I'm not demanding anything. I'm not saying I don't have this and I deserve it and there's an ego extension coming. I'm saying this is who I am. I have realized myself as a full entity in alignment with myself. These are the things that I require out of this lifetime and out of these resources that are available to keep me in that state. Universe goes, here you go. Thank you. Thank you for making it so clear and not telling me one thing, feeling a different way, and having a completely separate intention, forking us off in a million different directions when we speak to universe. Show up. Show up. Be so present in your own power and your own alignment with everything by surrendering that control, knowing you are where you are because you're exactly where you need to be. It's really that simple. Don't try to convolute it by saying, I don't want to miss out on my purpose. If you're living authentically as you can, you're already living up to your purpose. And all the details that surround that energy and that frequency are going to change and be varying over the whole course of your lifetime. It's the intention and your source of energy and your state of consciousness. That's where it all formulates from, first and foremost. Thank you, Cindy. I'm glad you're appreciating the talk. And I love getting on here talking about this stuff. These are things that I worked so hard on in my own world, understanding that it was meant to be shared with the collective. All of this empowerment I'm doing for myself as an individual, for my reality that I'm building, is being expressed in a shared plane of existence, the third dimension. So let's elevate together. Let's express that individual and honor that individual unique presence so much that when we bring it to the formula of the third dimension shared existence, that alchemy as a whole reaches a brand new state, a whole new state of existence. Ooh, we're going to be getting into some powerful stuff. On that same note, coming up next week, I may be looking at bringing a guest on. She is a good friend of mine, and we've been having some really good conversations recently about societal transitions and certain ways that we're looking at how humanity and how society's current operating system is going to evolve, how the systems at play, like the banking systems, financial stuff, governments, are all going to be shifting over the next while. And without fear mongering, I'm going to be opening up discussions to talk about human capacity on what these types of paradigms would actually mean, what it would call for out of us as individuals, as society, as a collective, to reach these levels, these paradigms. And I'm really excited to be able to expand into some of these conversations and get into some of this inner capacity development. Ooh, it's going to be some powerful stuff. With that being said, I don't think we have any questions today. A lot of wonderful comments, great presence, great presentation. Thank you so much. Please keep tuned in. These are only going to get more and more interesting as we keep going down the way here. Like I said, I'm condensing things, and I feel like I'm almost rushing through stories and I'm like, oh no, I can't forget that part. But adding that part adds like a whole new tangent on. So I'm really excited about being able to express a lot of this stuff. And we have Tango mentioning let's continue next week where we left off here today. That's my intention. That's absolutely my intention. And part of that, so much of like we had discussed through my stories today, was about personal development, that capacity development to reach a new state of perception and conscious awareness. And I think leading into some of these conversations about things like Jasara, for example, and new systems that are supposed to be evolving in our society, I think that's going to be right on point with this next week. And save some for the campfire, Alex. Yeah, right. No, we'll keep howling under these moons together. Don't you worry. I appreciate it so much, everybody. We're coming up to the top of the hour.
I hope now you feel like you were a contender. You tried to make your way out, and I pulled you back in.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. I can't wait. Take care of yourselves.